I got involved in some machine learning research and got a research program internship at the University of Colorado, where I got some experience in machine learning development. And then when I graduated, I took this job at IBM because I was interested in that technical aspect. And I was also really interested in policy. So I wanted to work in the public sector. I thought that would be a cool kind of intersection of the things I was interested in. But at the time, it kind of seemed more like I was doing short-term bursts towards the things I was interested in. And that like sort of led to the next thing. But yeah, so before I was directly at IBM, I was a college student. So I graduated right into this job and had some experience in engineering, some experience in machine learning, and just interviewed for the job and took it, but was particularly interested in that public sector component.
Okay, thank you. So you didn't sit down and have this big career plan and say, these are my next steps and this is exactly what I'm going to do after I graduate.
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely had one of those made, but it did not really play out the way that I thought it was going to. Yeah, I was interested in AI and machine learning. I was doing some studying in that when I was a student, and I became really interested in AI safety and AI ethics, which is actually kind of how I found the EA community as well. I was kind of doing this work at Penn State, where I went to school, and at the University of Colorado, where I did some research. And the professors that I was talking to didn't really know that much about AI safety or AI ethics. They, weren't that concerned about it. And so I kind of took it upon myself to dive into some of that research and found some really great work kind of coming out of EA sources, like FHI and CFI, these like research think tanks at Oxford and at Cambridge, and kind of came into the community that way. So yeah, that's kind of the story of how that happened. But there wasn't kind of a like determined plan. I just kind of became interested in this, and I thought that going into government work would be an interesting lens to look at policy and at some technical development.
Okay, great. And did you know, taking on the job, that you would have this split role between being a consultant but also working for the internal think tank?
No, I didn't. I think that's one of the things that's kind of more like a lesson that I've learned in the past couple of years of being a professional and a student, is just kind of seeking out opportunities when you get into a space where those opportunities exist. So when I came to IBM for the first year I was there, I was actually working on a client project doing tax fraud detection for the US government. So I was a data scientist kind of sitting on the front lines, butt in front of a computer 8 hours a day, running decision trees and neural networks and all this stuff on like massive amounts of data. Basically just working with a federal client saying, okay, we're this is what we're trying to do. And kind of working through the business processes of that, which was at times very interesting, but also at times like incredibly boring, and kind of gave me more of a perspective into like, okay, this is how the government, actually works. Like, this is how you actually deploy models. There's like so much teaming and like requirements and like, review processes. Like, you don't just, like in college, you just run a couple cool Python programs and that's it. But that's like was such a small amount of my time. But through the course of that year, kind of working on this tax fraud work, I knew I was really interested in AI safety. I had written my thesis on it when I graduated, and I was kind of just telling people at IBM that that's what I was interested in and what I wanted to do. So I started getting like little pieces of work here and there, like, okay, well, we need someone to edit this paper. We need someone to do some research for this. Can you come and help with this panel? And then when the time came up for kind of this hybrid internal position, I was selected to do, kind of a bunch of that stuff in this weird, multifaceted role that I'm in now.
Wow. Okay. So that's, I think, a wonderful lesson to just share with others, that like, go to the opportunities, find a space you're interested in, that is somewhat aligned with your career plan, but go to the opportunities and then just make sure that you're making sure that people around you know that you're very interested in these these things and happy to help out if you're a consultant on these projects, if you're in a different type of organization that has these opportunities to do research or more cutting edge work, that you would like to be considered as one of those people.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other lesson is to take 5-year plans very loosely. Not that I'm against long-term planning. I think it's great to kind of have a vision for your career. But just like in the reality of, my own life and a lot of people I've talked to, it's like, what really happens is you go somewhere that you're interested in, and then this new opportunity that you hadn't even seen or thought about arises, and then you kind of take that. So instead of thinking like, okay, well, I'm going to do this for 2 years, and then I'm going to go to this grad school and do this thing, and then I'm going to get a job at this place, like, or think about, and one of the reasons I like EA so much is that it's more focused on, okay, well, what problem do I want to solve? How do I want to progress towards that in the next couple of years? And just having the patience to let that play out, right, over a long span of time.
Yeah, and not being afraid to revise the plan looking over it every every 2 years or every year. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Great. So I'm very curious to hear about this position that you have, because you have a lot of roles. You're a data scientist, a project manager, you're a writer, a researcher. What does a typical day look like for you? Because I usually ask that for consultants, and I used to work as a consultant, and that's like, you could do anything, but with your role, it's really
anything.
Yeah,
exactly. So yeah, I guess to explain a little bit more about how I got into that position, right, I had been working at this project doing tax fraud, and just kind of telling everyone that I wanted to do this AI ethics work, and it kind of came to be that because I was being really vocal about that, I kind of slipped into this little hodgepodge position. So for those of you who are not consultants, typically you work externally, so you bill to a client, right? They're like a government agency, whoever wants you to help work for them. So I was doing that for the first year I was at IBM, and then I moved internal. So I'm not billing to a client, I'm just doing a bunch of internal stuff. So the position that kind of made this possible is I started managing a program, an internal IBM program that works on thought leadership. We call it Eminence, like basically building the IBM brand throughout the public sector. And so I manage that whole program and manage a bunch of people within it. And that actually really doesn't have anything to do with AI ethics or AI safety specifically. It's just kind of an internal management position. But because I'm doing that, I also have a bunch more time in my hours plan, right, in my 40-hour week to go and do, like 10 hours a week on writing papers for some IBM thought leadership on AI and running this internal AI ethics team. So that's kind of how that position came to be. It was just a bunch of threads coming together. So I should probably also say, during the year that I was working as a consultant on tax fraud, one of the kind of side projects that I worked on was starting this AI ethics team. Me and another woman, Anna Lenhart, who is now a data fellow, technology fellow in Congress. She was just awesome. Started this team because we were thinking, okay, we work for the government. We're making these algorithms that are, really impactful, sometimes making really important decisions about who gets benefits, who is policed, and we should be thinking about how could this possibly affect people negatively, right? What's the long-term impacts of this? We should kind of have a mechanism in place to do that, and we didn't. So we created this team to kind of start forming some of that. And over the course of last year, we had worked on that as kind of a side project. And now that I'm in this internal role, I do that a little bit more full time.
And when you approached IBM about this idea of starting up this side project, which I guess would take time out of your client hours, what was the response to that suggestion from you?
Well, we got really lucky because we had an advocate. We had one of the executives in our practice really vouch for us. But there was definitely people who didn't want the project to happen, right? Internal hours aren't like, if it's not making money, it's not super productive. Like, you have to get people to invest in it, right? So that's there was a lot of bureaucracy surrounding that. And initially we did get really lucky because we had sort of an executive sponsor. But we've kind of had to keep fighting against, or like kind of proving our worth, right? Like, okay, here's our value add. This is why the team is important. This is what we're doing. This is kind of where we fit in. And I guess that's sort of another one of the, not to be too preachy, but one of the like lessons learned that I was thinking about approaching this talk, is just doing the thing that you think would be helpful and kind of creating something that you would like to see. And then just like really do the heavy hitting of making other people see why it's valuable. Because if what we had done is first tried to find someone to give us permission to do this thing, there would have been all of this like, well, should we do it? What's the value add? Let's do a proposal. Let's do a cost benefit analysis. Like there's 7 million people who want to get their fingers on it to approve it. But we really just started actually doing it. And then we were like, hey, this is what we're doing and this is why it's helpful. And people were like, well, okay, like that seems fine. So yeah, that approach has worked really shockingly well, to just kind of go ahead and say, okay, well, we're doing this thing. And if you don't want us to do it, say so. But or if you don't say anything, we're just going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great advice for people, whether they're, trying out entrepreneurship or if they're working in smaller or bigger organizations even, and just want to see something done that isn't currently in place. Yeah, fantastic. So, and how would you say that you have a natural kind of founder entrepreneur within you, or was that just something that like you just had to rise to the occasion and get your hands dirty because you wanted to see it done?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that I definitely have a lot of like imposter syndrome of like, I can't be doing this. Like, I'm not the one who should do this. And I think that it's like, I don't know. I think it's sometimes harmful to say like, oh, there's like natural entrepreneurs and there's natural people who do this and that. I think like if there's something you want to do, you can do it through like many different ways. But yeah, I certainly never saw myself as a natural entrepreneur, but this is something I cared about. And so I was like, well, I'm just going to make it happen. And I guess that is a trait of some entrepreneurs, but I wouldn't label myself that way. So yeah. I think that can be sometimes like a gatekeeping, right? Of like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur, right?
Right.
And like,
yeah.
You don't have to have started a business to do anything.
Absolutely. You can be an entrepreneur. You can, just be a project leader or project initiator. And it doesn't have to have that label. So I'm really interested in hearing, what does a typical day look like, or what are some of the tasks that you do when you have the consultant hat, but also when you have the hat of being like the researcher and the thought leader in the think tank?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough to say a typical day. Honestly, there's really no exact mechanism that I follow through any day. I guess I would say it depends a lot on one of the things that I've had to learn how to do, and I think is a really valuable skill, is to be able to like assess my energy levels and like be where they're at for that day. So since I have like so many different hats that I can wear, some days I wake up and I'm like, the only thing I can do today is just answer my whole backlog of emails, and I'll do some Excel spreadsheets that I've been putting off. I will like submit a bill or do these things because my brain is not going to do the high level research stuff today. That's it. And then understanding kind of like, okay, today I really want to work on some more like high level cognitive stuff, and just kind of allowing myself to do those different things at different times. But that being said, there are some days where I'm like, okay, I need to get this paper done and I'm just going to write it. Maybe it's not going to be like my best work, but that's kind of it. So yeah, I think it's really more about balancing all of those different things. I think my typical day is really just me balancing like 6 different plates and figuring out which one to like balance today and where they're kind of all at. and taking it kind of piece by piece that way. So like I'm working on a paper right now that I haven't done anything for like maybe a week because I've been doing other stuff. And then I'm like, okay, well now this is higher on the priority list. I'm going to work on this today and tomorrow. And then working on kind of some daily management stuff. So lists are helpful. I have a like enormous Trello board with just like, okay, here are all the things that you can be doing.
I love Trello.
I love Trello. That's a big takeaway. Trello is great. And I have this like huge list of stuff. So on any given day, it's kind of, it's definitely helpful, I think, to be like, because we all have those days where it's like, okay, I'm on it today. My brain is sharp. I've had my coffee. This is the day where I outline my paper and I start writing it. That's it. I'm doing it. Versus like, that's not it. I slept 2 hours last night. I'm like, here's a couple other things I could do today, and I'll just kind of work on those, and then just let myself rest and not be judgmental about that. So I'm still working on the not being judgmental part, but I guess that's kind of the day in a life.
Yeah, I can relate to that. That sounds great. Be nice to yourself. Do what you can that day. Make use of great systems and prioritize what you have to prioritize at that time. Ideally proactively, but sometimes reactively. Yeah. So what are the skills and experiences that you draw on the most and have been most useful in your roles?
I would honestly say probably the best skill is, I don't want to use like a buzzword, so I'm trying to think of a good way to describe it, but the best way I would describe it is probably like grit or resilience, right? Just the idea of like, okay, here's the thing that I need to accomplish. And I might not know how to do that. I might not know the process by which to do that, but I'm going to go figure that out, right? So just kind of having that like ability to leap the gap of like, okay, here's where I want to end up and here's where I am. And I don't know how to cross that. So like, I send a lot of emails to people who I think might be able to help me do the things that I need to do. Or a lot of
ask for help is.
Yeah, a lot of research on the internet. Like I'm currently writing an academic paper that I'm formatting in latex. And I like do not know how to use it. So I just am Googling a lot of how to use it. So I think that's been a very important skill is like, okay, I can identify what needs to get done. And then I'm just going to say like, well, I just like try to figure it out. I think oddly enough, and I think this is kind of coming more and more to light in technical circles, is that my technical abilities are not that important, right? Like I did a lot of coding in college, and that was definitely very helpful. Learning a coding language was really helpful because I have to do some coding in my job. But I do think it's kind of the ability to like figure out high level requirements and then like act on those, right? So existing in a space where there's no like X, Y, and Z that you have to do. It's just like, okay, go help and make a difference. And then parsing all of that huge, like, wow, what do I do? There's so many things I could possibly do into like, okay, here's some action steps I can take.
Yeah. I guess that goes back to what you said about just getting started when you feel like there's a void of something that should have been created. And you don't have to ask for permission before you go out and do it always. You don't have to have the whole plan figured out. You can start by like, this is where I want to go. And I know the next step, and then I'll figure it out as I go along.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like, and I love working with people who are like that too. Like when I can tell people like, hey, these are the things that we need. Like, this is where we need to be. And they're like, okay, like, let me do it. Like, I'll get there for you. Instead of like, okay, well, what do I do? It's like, I don't know what you need to do either. Like, go figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious what advice you would give to other people who maybe listen to this conversation and like are interested in a role very similar to yours or pursuing projects that might have very similar aspects to the role that you have and the journey that you've had so far. What advice do you think that you would give them?
Yeah, I think just kind of re-emphasizing some of the stuff I've mentioned already, like make it known what you want to do, like be really, really vocal about it, to the point where, and like, this is kind of like, as a woman, kind of living in a man's world, like it feels sometimes like I'm annoying, right? Where I'm like, I want to be doing this. This is what I want to do. I have these skills. This is what I want to help with. And just keep doing it anyway. You're not annoying. You're advocating for yourself. And people will pick up on that, and then they'll start to ask you to do things, or like bring you in on stuff that's aligned with that. And now you have a portfolio, right? And now you can say, okay, well, I've done all these things, and now I'm gonna like kind of pave my way. So like advocate for yourself in that way, like make it known what you want to do and ask people to like let you do it.
Yeah.
And I guess again, like not being traditional. I think like I remember having this moment as like a young EA on the 80,000 hours job board, which I think many people have seen. And I was like going through it, and I was like, none of these jobs are either what I want to do or what I'm good at. And I was like, oh my God, I need to go learn how to like be a computer scientist, software developer, because like that's the only thing on this board. And the job that you want is probably not on the board. You have to like create it or forge it. So don't kind of be not looking within those traditional boxes. Like those are all great places to start, and then tweaking them to be a little bit more what you're interested in. And yeah, and like ask for forgiveness, not permission. Just like go do it. Just go do the thing. You know, I mean, use your head. Don't like do anything too crazy. But especially within like large organizations, people, if you kind of just do something that you think will be helpful and then show it to people, that will get you, I think, a long way. But just trying to get someone's permission first is it's validating, right? It's like, okay, well, I'm now ready to do this, but often it's just like this bureaucratic nightmare trying to get someone to give you permission to do it. So just give yourself permission. I give you permission right now. Just like go do it.
Yeah. Read the or watch the talks on how to accidentally do harm and avoid that, and then go do it.
Yes, exactly. As a caveat, think a little bit about what you're going to do, and don't do something that might be harmful. But
yeah. So if this touches on what we've already spoken about, but if there's more you want to add, please do. So if you're looking to hire someone, maybe like just clone yourself, or like someone who could be working alongside you or in your close team, what skills do they have? What attributes? And maybe experience, or maybe like a certain type of experience isn't that important. It's more of a skill set. What do they look like?
Yeah, you know, that's a great question, because I actually think I would not want to clone myself. I think I would work really terribly with myself, because I think you have to know the things that you're good at doing and you're not good at doing. Like I'm really good with big picture stuff. I'm horrible with details. I am so absent-minded about detail stuff. So I feel like I would want to work with someone who's really good at that. And I think just like having the sense of saying, okay, well, I want to work with people who round me out a little bit more. That's probably what I would focus on. But again, like I said earlier, it's that sense of like initiative, I think, is important, or not even initiative, just like being able to kind of figure it out and having the confidence of like, okay, I can figure this thing out. And if not, I can ask for help and we can kind of work towards it collaboratively. So kind of having that mindset. Someone who's kind and like nice and fun, I think, is also really important. I don't know. I don't think that we have like work selves and home selves. I think we're just like ourselves. So someone who's just kind of cool and real would be great. I think that's really important, kind of like in life, but also in a work setting. But yeah, someone who isn't exactly like me, but who complements that, who's more, who remembers more stuff. I'm so forgetful. So I would need someone to keep me on top of stuff.
Thank God for Trello. Yeah.
Yes, I know. Thank God for Trello. Everyone should get Trello. It's great.
It's changed my work life and my private life.
You can have
every Friday. I just write down everything, and then my weekend is like completely work, thought free.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I like that.
So I do some career coaching in my role, and a lot of the time people ask about like, what are the different types of skills that I need to be able to do well in a certain career path? And one thing I think is quite difficult for people to figure out is, well, how strong are my skills in this certain, or how strong am I in this skill set compared to other people? And if I want to get stronger at this particular skill because I really want to have this type of job, how can I develop that? So for the skills that you mentioned, kind of like figuring things out and I guess to some degree like being very detail oriented and conscientious. How would you recommend people test these things to see how strong they are relative to other people, and how could they improve these skills?
That's a great question. I don't know if I have an answer to that off the top of my head. I do think I am a very strong believer in experiential learning, right? I do love online classes and MOOCs as much as the next person. But I do think there's a lot of value to be had in going and having experiences. And I also think that there's value in like all the experiences that you have, right? I think I thought for a long time, especially kind of in EA, and this is maybe one of the critiques I would have of some EA, career discussions, is that like only certain types of experience are valid, right? Where like you have this internship or this thing that you've done and you do this research, and that's valid and will help you in your career. And there's so much more that kind of goes into that, right? Like, you can observe your ability to solve problems in like a whole array of circumstances. So this is going to be such a hippie answer, but I do think it kind of is the process of developing more self-knowledge and like the ability to check in with yourself and say, okay, like, let me watch myself do these things and like actually be honest about what I'm doing, right? Even like, how am I handling this argument that I'm having with my dad right now? Like, what is my reaction here? Like, what am I doing? What am I not doing? Like stuff like that, I think.
Yeah.
And I think you can kind of derive that from a lot of different places. Not just like, okay, well, go take this online quiz and it'll tell you if you're a good manager or not. I think it's just like, I think there's a lot less rigidity in the definitions of things than I think we're presented with. So, which is scary because then you don't totally know what to define yourself as or how to measure yourself. But yeah, I guess short answer to that rambly answer would be developing self-awareness and just being really observant of yourself.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's crucial for both, like growing as a professional, but also just finding happiness in life. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, absolutely. So a final question before we move over to the Q&A and the great questions that have been asked. If you were to give yourself, when you just started thinking about like doing your first career plan and thinking about like, how can I have a positive impact in the world and how do I do that through my career? What advice regarding like trying to have a positive impact would you give your past self?
Yeah, I would probably say, I'd probably tell myself that, you already have the skills that you need to make a positive impact, right? You don't need to go acquire them from some like skill farm somewhere. You already have them, right? You already have certain abilities that you've developed. And you have a toolkit already, right? So thinking about how can I sharpen or develop some tools in my toolkit, whether they be, okay, I'm a really good communicator. I'm really good at writing. I am like just kind, and I'm kind and I get along with people well. I'm really brilliant at this computer skill. I do X, Y, and Z. I would probably say that, like, start from where you're at, right? And I don't think it's actually that effective to go and try to make yourself something else. Like, if you just aren't very good at public speaking, then don't be, right? You don't really need to. I mean, to some extent, you need to be passable at certain skills, but like, look at the toolbox that you have and that you've developed, either like at whatever point in your life you're at, and then just build from there, right? Like maybe you get a couple of new tools, but you've got like 80% of what you're working with kind of in there. So figure out how you can use that, instead of saying like, okay, well, I need to go find other skills. Like see what you're working with. It's enough. You already have those skills there. So work with that kind of.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to pick the first question from the Q&As or questions submitted, and this is one that I think is great and I can really relate to. So I'm looking forward to your answer. So any tips on techniques for enhancing your credibility at work as a young professional woman?
Oh man, that's a great question. That's really good. And I mean, I guess I would just say first that like it's hard. Like people do not believe in you because you're young and a woman, or a combination of both. I think it's been really important for me to have advocates, and to also be like very specific about like, I need you to advocate for me in this way. Like there have been some people in my career at IBM that have helped me out, and it's often been because I've gone to them and said, hey, this is a problem I'm having. I'm feeling a lot of resistance. Like I'd like for you to advocate for me in this way to these people. And like they often do it, right? Just like just asking very specifically.
I've never heard that, but I think that's great. And just having the guts to ask is
there was like a specific example earlier this year. I was having there was a lot of pressure on me from some internal leadership to like go back to a client role where I was billing to a client, and to do that I would have had to stop doing a lot of the stuff that I'm currently doing now that I think is really cool. And so I was under a lot of pressure. I was trying to work through it. It was really not working. It was very frustrating. And so I went to an executive I've worked closely with who like really likes my work and knows me well. And I said, hey, this is a situation. This is what's happening. I'm feeling really frustrated. Can you step in and work this out? And he was like, yeah, totally. And he sent like 2 emails and they were like, oh yeah, whatever this guy says, because he's senior and we'll listen to him. So, I mean, as much as it sucks sometimes, like people are not going to listen to you. And you need to get someone to kind of step in for you, but like asking for that, right? Like, hey, come step up to bat for me here. Like, I need you to. And I guess not letting it get you down, right? Like being conscious in your brain of like, okay, like I'm being dismissed because I'm young and that's really hurtful, but it doesn't mean I'm not capable. But yeah, just, it does happen and it sucks. So picking your battles where you can, and knowing you're probably not gonna win everyone or get the respect that you really want everywhere. So
so I love how you mentioned the being able to talk to people about this and asking for help from seniors. And I guess like mentorship is another way of getting the help, support, and maybe wisdom of more senior individuals. Do you have any tips on how to find a mentor?
Well, I also am looking for tons of mentors all the time. I think it's sometimes difficult. So I would say, again, just like reaching out to people and advocating for yourself is important. There's lots of good mentorship programs out there. Shout out to Catherine, who runs the EA WANBAM mentorship program. I know they're looking for new mentees. So if you are looking for a mentor, you too could have one. I'm sure Catherine will show the details after this call. And yeah, again, sometimes just being like, even though it feels awkward and weird, like being really explicit about like, hey, like I'm a young person in this field and I look up to you. Like, would you kind of be my mentor and advocate, like to help me figure some stuff out? People will often say either yes or no. So either kind of stumbling into a role where you're like, okay, I have mentors that I managed to work for, or again, just being kind of explicit of like, hey, will you just be my mentor? And that's something that feels like even to me, just saying it, like a little bit icky, like, oh, I don't want to say that out loud. But you can, and it's often like an easier way to actually make it happen.
Yeah. I've had a bunch of mentorships myself, and I've found them to be so useful. And it's really worth getting over that feeling of not wanting to ask and just sending that email or making that call. So there's a question here that goes, which questions should be answered by a collaboration between technical AI safety researchers and ethicists, do you think?
Like all of them. I think all of technical development should be multidisciplinary. Maybe not every single question, that's a little bit of a theatrical exaggeration, but I think it's actually really much easier for AI and technical or emerging tech to become unintentionally harmful or biased if it is just developed by one group of stakeholders. So like having users participate in design, right? Like from design to like strategizing to implementation to like deployment within an organization to like consumers buying it. There's tons of different people who have expertise in doing all of those things. And I think they should all kind of be part of the process. My dream is to create like a cohesive AI ecosystem that kind of addresses ethics throughout that whole pipeline, but we're pretty far away from that right now. So yeah, I think everything about tech should be multidisciplinary, pretty much.
So as someone who, through your think tank role, but maybe more so through your consultant role, who meets a lot of stakeholders, who's been to a lot of different clients and organizations, what do you see that ecosystem looking like? Or do you see that that ethics perspective being introduced in your projects that you work on with AI?
Yeah, I think it's like, the thing that I think it would need to look like is a set of guiding principles that are then translated to specifics for each part of the ecosystem, right? So like, not like an example of that would be value would be non-biased, right? You want AI to be non-biased. So what that would trickle down to in like, if you're a technical developer, you might ask them a question like, are you using fairness metrics like statistical parity? Are you doing counterfactual analysis in your data set? Like questions like that would make sense for the data scientist. Mm-hmm. But then you would ask like a project manager, like, do you have a diverse set of people who are auditing this algorithm, right? Which is like also important to have diverse voices within the development process. So both of those are kind of addressing that issue of bias, but they would look different for different people developing it.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think there's like a huge discussion and so many follow-up questions to have about this. So in the interest of having more questions on the table, I'll move on, but I'd love to follow up about this. Someone's asking, can you share any specific AIFX projects that you're working on? And I'm guessing also previously have worked on.
Yeah. So one of the things that I worked on was so again, like my big vision is this like ecosystem, right? And that's kind of what I'm trying to work towards. But what we have created is like a vulnerability assessment. Basically like a series of, it's like very short, very easy to answer. And it's just a bunch of questions for data scientists about an algorithm. And the intention is to give it a score, like a numerical score that's rated as high, low, or medium vulnerability. So if you ask these questions and a data scientist is like, okay, my algorithm is working on predictive policing, it's a super deep neural net, we don't have a human in the loop, and our data set is not that big. It's like, wow, that's really problematic. Like that's very high vulnerability versus someone who's kind of saying, okay, well, we're just using like a really shallow decision tree that we have labeled and we, can explain to the client. And all we're doing with it is just like automating like a back office process. And there's a human in the loop that reviews it. It's like, okay, well, that seems a lot less problematic. So trying to quantify that like through a series of questions. So we created that and are trying to deploy it. But yeah, there's like just so much stuff that could be done, right? Kind of across that ecosystem that I was talking about.
Great. So another question is, which papers in AI ethics can you recommend reading?
Recommend reading? Man, I have like so many papers saved in my Google Drive that I just don't don't have read. There's so many. I guess I would say, what are you interested in? Like technical, share them with us. It's on a private IBM box folder. I can't do that. I'm sorry. Yeah. But there's like tons of great resources. I guess trying to figure out like what field specifically you're interested in, and then doing like a mini literature review. Like, are you interested in technical model behavior? Are you interested in like organizational auditing, like bias and stuff? There's some great, I guess I will say, I can send some stuff to the chat. Like, there's a bunch of good papers coming out of MIT. The Algorithmic Justice League does a lot of really good work. Data Democracy Project also does really good work. The AI Now Institute at NYU. So maybe just going to those places and seeing, like, clicking on papers. Human Computer Interaction Lab at Stanford is great. They do good work. Again, FHI, which is the Future of Humanity Institute at Oxford, and CFI, which is the Center for the Future of Intelligence at Cambridge, are also great. So I guess I would say go to like those places, and they'll all have a website that's like, look at our papers, and then like go through those and see what are interesting to you.
And so here's a really cool question. How do you think that you've had a positive impact through your career so far? And then after that, how do you hope to have an impact in the future? And you've alluded to this through your exciting ecosystem, but maybe other than that.
How have I had a positive impact? Wow, that's such a hard question. I think maybe this is like, I don't know. I think I don't really think about myself that way enough, right? Like, I don't think about my positive impact. I think probably this AI ethics team at IBM that I've helped start and kind of start a conversation, I think has been really positive in changing the direction of the stuff we talk about and making some disruptive noise about AI ethics in the public sector. I'm really
proud of that. Would you say that the main impact has come from just influencing other actors in that space, or from the way that IBM goes about just working with clients in AI related projects?
I think the main impact is that we had kind of got together with a bunch of other people at IBM in like different sectors who had all been doing like, hey, we don't really have any AI ethics stuff, let's all do it. So we connected with like 5 or 6 other teams from like the UK, from like the design team, from the research team, who are all kind of creating these like within their own sector or their own industry, like, let's talk about AI ethics. So our perspective was from the US government industry, and then kind of getting together with all these people and then slowly like bringing that up the IBM chain. And so like kind of pressuring IBM to make a more consolidated AI ethics team, which they have since done. So I think that's been great. I don't know if that was totally just because of us, but like because of that collective movement of like bottom up efforts. So now they've started doing some more top down stuff. So that's been really good to see. And
for future impact?
Future impact, I think, I think that AI ethics ecosystem is something I'm really interested in. Just kind of bringing more awareness to that being important, and having people pay more attention to it. And I don't know. I think maybe that's something I should think about. I'm like, I don't have a great answer to that question. I think I think long term, what I want to do vaguely is continue to work on embedding AI ethics, like an ethical, value aligned AI, into the way that we produce technology, which is really vague. So short term, I just want IBM to actually start doing it, right? Like, I want to actually start deploying this in a couple of different test scenarios. So still pretty fuzzy.
That's absolutely fine. And yeah, here's a question about what you would recommend someone look for as like important features when selecting university courses, or what university to go to if someone was to follow a similar path as yourself. So should they look for example, like a quality of the course content, quality of lectures or research at the university, the like reputation of the university? Is it like a top 10 uni, networking opportunities, anything like that? Or do you, like, does one of those stand out to you, or would you look for something else?
Man, unfortunately, I think I'm a horrible person to ask this question to, because um, I just went to like a state school that was cheap for me to go to, and most of what I learned about machine learning and computer science was not in my classes. It was in the other things that I did. So I think probably the answer to that question would be to look at much less the quality of courses and more like the opportunities that you would have at a school. So I went to Penn State, which was huge, which had the benefit of having like lots of different opportunities. So there was so many things that I could do and get involved in, which I think
So
was really, really helpful for me.
what were some of those opportunities, just to like make it concrete for those listening?
So so when I went to the University of Colorado, I was accepted to a research program studying machine learning and I had at that point in time really like some computer science background, but not any machine learning. So I think I just got really lucky and got accepted to that program, and then learned a lot about machine learning while I was there. That was really formative for me. That was really awesome. When I was at Penn State, some friends and I started a data science group, like Penn State's first data science club called Knit New Data Labs, which was kind of another interesting way to get involved in the space. And yeah, and then having the opportunity to just like take a bunch of classes. Some of the best classes I took when I was at Penn State were like non-technical. I took this technology philosophy class that was the best class I took while I was an undergraduate, hands down. It was awesome. Close second was probably the Greek mythology class that I took, which was really interesting.
Unexpected answer
yeah,
from a Komsky major.
I know, yeah. So I don't know if I'm a great person to ask that question to, because I think like again, it's less about like, okay, well, what school do I go to, and like what am I gonna do there, right? So like if I would say go somewhere that has a lot of opportunities to do a whole bunch of stuff. Only go to a really small school if you know that it's really going to be perfect for you, right? I think one of the best pieces of advice I got from a friend was like, just try to open as many doors as you possibly can throughout your life. And you don't have to go through them. Just try to keep them open, right? So
yeah, I think that's great advice, and kind of a great summary of the advice that you've given throughout this chat, or really like figure out where you want to get to, or kind of where you want to go, and just go do it, and dare to ask or dare to apply for things and create your own education. I remember from my own like uni years that the like different societies and projects I worked on also were more formative for me than the actual classes I went to. And I think that's great advice to give. So yeah, thanks so much for sharing all of your experiences and all the work that you do. I hope this AI safety or AI ethics ecosystem actually grows into place in the years to come. And I look forward to following you.
Thanks, me too. Yeah, no, it was great to talk. If anyone has any other questions, definitely feel free to reach out to me and continue the conversation. Just, sitting at home like everyone else.